If you have any dignity, apologize to the
podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to Apologize to the Podcast. My name's Tyler, I go by Jalaman22 on YouTube, and with me is...
It's me, AJ, from the Far Off Future, and the Dancing Army YouTube channel.
There you go. We're trying something a little different this time. I lost the audio for the for our Dan Curtis Dracula episode, so we're gonna this is attempt 2. And I'm actually got AJ over the phone, and he's on speakerphone, so hopefully everything sounds fine. So, how are you doing over there?
Good, and if you can't hear me, blame Verizon, and Sprint, and cell phones, and the internet, or something.
The internet? I'm going to blame the internet. It could be Skype, though. I mean, it could be worse, I guess. Of course, I have a phone from crickets, so maybe we'll hear chirping of crickets. Because it is, nighttime in the South, so you got all that.
That was a really great joke. I think we should renew that joke for a third season.
Not again. Well, anyway, so, of course, we watched the Dan Curtis Dracula, or Bram Stoker's Dracula, or Dracula starring Jack Palance, or, numerous different names for it.
Of all the horror stories ever told, one towers above them all. The original masterpiece of the macabre. The undeniable terror of Bram Stoker's Dracula. An evil that spreads its shadow of darkness across Europe to Victorian England. A terrifying love story that reaches back into the dead past. A nightmare that stalks through the centuries to embrace the living.
Can't you at least tell me something?
If the cause of your fiancé's affliction is what I think it is, then beside it the most venomous serpent in the world would seem a plaything for children.
No. You're dead.
Now I'm yours forever.
Many motion pictures claim to be horrific. Now comes one which reaches a new height in unabated terror. The Bram Stoker masterpiece, Dracula.
And this is first episode we've done on a Dracula movie, but we've watched numerous versions of Dracula together. So I guess, starting that off, it was a book by Bram Stoker, one of the most popular vampire books ever written, and it's been made into numerous different film adaptations. And this is a very unique one, and this is a very important one that we watched, the Dan Curtis one. So I guess before we dive in, what are your thoughts on the various different Dracula movies, or the adaptions of the Bram Stoker Dracula, not just movies with Dracula in the title, and if you can choose, what would be your favorite version?
Yeah, so I've actually managed to see many versions of the classic Dracula story. I've never read the book, but I've seen the original Bela Lugosi. I've seen one of the Christopher Lee / Peter Cushing as Van Helsing.
The Hammer one.
I'm sorry?
The Hammer Films one.
The Hammer, yes, the Hammer version. I've seen, these kind of count, but they kind of don't count. I've seen 2 different versions of Nosferatu, the original silent film version, and then also the Klaus Kinski version. That was like the 70s, right?
Yeah, that was the remake of Nosferatu was made in 1979, and it was directed by Werner Herzog, and it's a really interesting, German or new wave German film.
Right. And then I also saw the Bram Stoker's Dracula with the one in the 90s.
With Gary Oldman as Dracula.
But yeah, it's Gary Oldman. And I think that might be it. Is there another one I've seen? You probably know better than me.
Dracula Dead and Loving It, the Mel Brooks one.
Oh, of course. How could I forget? Yeah.
I'm drinking wine and eating chicken.
He is. That's an awesome movie. She will become one herself.
She will become one herself. Or of course the best one. Creatures of the night. What mess they make.
Yeah.
We should devote a whole episode to Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. We need to do a lot more. We need to do our first Mel Brooks movie soon.
Oh yeah, totally. Because Mel Brooks has done 2 of the best horror homage / comedies, Young Frankenstein and Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Even though Young Frankenstein is better, but...
Yeah, but only slightly. I think Dracula Dead and Loving It's a much more underrated movie. And it's got great little moments from all the different Dracula movies. It's got a lot of influence, of course, from the Francis Ford Coppola one from the 90s. But then it's also got cool stuff from, of course, the Bela Lugosi Todd Browning one. And even some humorous, jabs at Hammer,
Yeah.
But I'd mostly say that the Mel Brooks one is more of a parody of the Bela Lugosi version and the Gary Oldman 90s version by Francis Ford Coppola. So.
Yeah, really, I guess if you think about it, Dracula is one of those stories where, there's been so many different adaptations of it. It's really kind of cool to see all the different ones and see kind of the many differences. Especially like, not the differences between like Nosferatu and Dracula, because they're still based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, and they have a very similar plot. But then like even the differences between a Nosferatu movie and a Dracula movie have their own like distinct feel. Like for example, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually Dracula is is meant to be a certain type of handsome, like not necessarily like I class it like a I guess a Hungarian like aristocratic handsome, but Nosferatu is meant to be like ugly.
Yeah.
And
Well, going back to the actual book, going to the book, he starts out as an old man who progressively gets younger, but he's not really depicted, or he's not described as being handsome. He's kind of described as being this really weird looking man with like a twirly mustache, and so he's not as exaggerated as in Nosferatu. He doesn't look like a rat. He doesn't look like a rodent.
He looks like a strange creature.
Yeah, but in the book he's depicted as like an older man, kind of like the one I haven't shown you it yet, but one that we'll have to watch one day is the Jess Franco Count Dracula, which is another one with Christopher Lee, and that one's actually pretty faithful with how Dracula looks, but the rest of the movie's not very faithful because they had to condense a lot of stuff because of budgetary reasons, and I don't know what the hell they were doing with Herbert Lawn as Doctor Van Helsing, who's now the leader of the asylum that's near Carfax Abbey, but I digress. But that movie has a lot of problems, but the good thing about the Jess Franco version is it does depict Dracula as an older man who gets younger, and he has the mustache and beard.
Wasn't the Jess Franco one? Does that have Christopher Lee, or am I thinking of it?
Yeah, it does have Christopher Lee. It's the one he made in between two Hammer movies. I think he made it in between Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. No, it's Dracula Has Risen from the Grave and Taste the Blood of Dracula. So he had left thinking he was going to make the true version, and then when the movie turned out not to be that great, he ran back. Well, he didn't run back, but he made more for Hammer. So
I see.
So, but yeah, it does have Christopher Lee, and a lot of people get it mixed up with the Hammer movies, even though it has no real connection to Hammer.
Yeah, well, I mean, can you blame them though? I'm trying to think of another. I guess it would be like if they had like enough, like say they had like a movie about a professor who goes out on adventures searching for ancient Jewish or Christian or Hindu artifacts, and it's called, Montana Monty, and it stars Harrison Ford. How are people supposed to get,
Yeah, they're gonna definitely get it mixed up with Indiana Jones, which is actually a good point, because you've seen one of the Jack Ryan movies with Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan, and then of course you saw Patriot Games. Now, if you watch the movie Air Force One, where he plays the president, it almost seems like a progression of the Jack Ryan character, because in the books, the Tom Clancy books, Jack Ryan does become president, so it almost seems like it's the same character, except he's named something different in Air Force One.
Right. So I was gonna say it's even worse for Christopher Lee, because not only is he playing a similar character, he is playing the same character. It's just not the same continuity, and it's with different directors and different studios.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the best type of typecasting, when you just like, well, we'll just get the best, we need to cast Dracula. Why don't we get Dracula from a different studio and have him do it? Like, okay, well,
yeah. Well, I mean that is a good point, but that's a good one to watch. But I think if they were going to make the most faithful version of Dracula, it'd be taking Christopher Lee from the Jess Franco version, and then putting him in the 1979 BBC 2-part movie called Count Dracula. They're both called Count Dracula, but the BBC one is actually the most faithful to the book, and to the point where they're literally just reading the book, or they're acting out the book. Like, it's so close to the book where it's exact dialogue and exact scene direction from the book. It's that close. So, you still should you still should read the book, but if you go and just watch the BBC one, or if we watch the BBC version, you pretty much don't have to read the book. It's pretty much the same thing, except slightly shorter.
Yeah.
Because they condense some of the characters.
I say it's funny that you mentioned that, though, because if you've read Dracula, but you're just now getting to Frankenstein, and I read Frankenstein years ago, but I haven't read Dracula, so there's
yeah.
Go figure.
I need to buy Dracula because I borrowed a copy from one of my coworkers, and it had the ugliest looking cover because Dracula is now in the public domain, so any publisher can publish it. But I really want to get like a nice hardbound leather edition. Splurge for a really expensive copy so it'll look really good on my bookshelf, even though I'm not really the biggest reader, but whatever. Well, out of those Dracula movies, do you have a favorite out of all those, or favorites, or?
Well, I think all of them are...
Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to mention. You also saw the Dario Argento Dracula 3D.
Oh, wow. How could I forget that one? Shame on me.
Oh, it's pretty bad.
I should get attacked by a giant praying mantis now.
Yep, or a magical teleporting Dracula who just goes, brah!
Yeah, that movie. Yeah, I guess it almost made me... I think the thing is about that one is it's very different from all the other ones in the weirdest ways that it almost makes you forget it's a Dracula movie.
Yeah, he never turns into a bat. He turns into an owl. He turns into a praying mantis. He turns into a Eurotrash actor. He turns into everything except for a bat, and that's really weird.
Yeah, well, back to my opinion on Dracula overall. I do enjoy watching the different versions. As a matter of fact, I believe it was a couple of years ago when we just watched two versions a night or something like that for 2 or 3 weeks or something. So I was literally watching the same story of Jonathan Harker goes to Hungary. He finds Dracula. Dracula goes to England, and he causes mischief between Lucy and Mina, and blah, blah, blah. I saw several different adaptations of the exact same story, but it's interesting when you have a story like that, and you have so many adaptations that bring in so many different elements, it actually becomes kind of interesting to parse out the differences between all of them. And I guess to Dracula's credit, I don't remember it being boring at the time. I remember being interested in seeing all these different versions. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, kind of the reason, because I know you were semi-interested in watching at least one of the Dracula movies, was, of course, it was October, so I was forcing people to sit through horror movies, and at least that one had a badge of honor because it's Dracula. It's one of the classier horror stories. But part of the inspiration for that actually came from there's a whole YouTube channel called The Phantom Reviews, and it has this film reviewer, and pretty much what he does is he does like Monster Madness or other video series where you just focus on a series of movies throughout a short period.
Uh-huh.
But his whole video series was dedicated to reviewing the various different versions of the Phantom of the Opera. So everything was, done with, the Family Opera. So he had all these different video reviews covering every version, and even including like fan films and DVDs of the various like stage adaptations, like the Andrew Lloyd Webber version with Michael Crawford and all of them. So that was a really cool video series, and I felt like I learned so much about Fan of the Opera when I did finally read the book. I had seen so many different versions of it, and Dracula is one of those where it's that big, So it's just really cool because I feel Dracula is a way more hardcore horror story. Well, do you think you could actually pick a particular favorite movie out of all of them?
Well, I think, really, that's kind of hard because I almost have to, put them in different, I don't know, because they are also different, and but I think if I had to do, my favorite, traditional or, non-comedy, and not counting the Nosferatu movies, I'd probably say the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee version.
Yeah.
Would be my favorite. But really, and the thing, I think a lot of it is that, because it's an older movie, so it kind of has, that, it has that, special kind of older movie quality to it, which I think fits well with, the story itself, because I kind of feel like modern adaptations of Dracula, especially as evidenced by the terrible CGI in Dario Argento's Dracula, I think you kind of need to do old school. You want a Dracula movie to have an old school feel because especially with all the original versions, all the the oldest versions, the plot itself takes place in the late 1800s. And all of the original versions kind of set the mood as to what a Dracula movie should be. So I think that when you add CGI and when you try to add special effects on a grand scale, kind of like what they try to do in Dracula Untold, which I haven't seen, so I suppose I'm prejudging it. But I still kind of feel like that particular movie didn't seem just kind of seeing the previews for it didn't really grab me because I didn't really feel like Dracula needed to be a grand special effects action story because that's not really what it is. But getting back to my point though, about Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, I liked it first of all because I know Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, especially from because they were both in Star Wars, which obviously I saw as a kid, so there's kind of that childhood connection there, seeing these actors who I knew from my childhood there, and it's also just kind of their interplay was really good, and their it's just kind of there is a kind of a childhood glee of seeing oh look, Grandma Tarkin is taking on Count Dooku, that's cool.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's actually a legitimately good movie, not just because it has Star Wars actors in it.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of sums it up for me.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say that I kind of agree. I've seen a few more different versions of Dracula than that you have. And there's a couple I want to show you. Most obviously the BBC version, and also the Frank Langella version from the late 70s, the so-called Disco Dracula. So if I had to pick a favorite, it's really hard for me, but I'd probably say Horror Dracula or just Dracula, the one that you just talked about, the Hammer one. But as a second choice, so I'm not just being a copycat, I'd probably say that my favorite version of Dracula so far is, I'm going to go ahead and say it. For right now, it's going to be, it has to probably be the BBC version and possibly parts of this one, the Dan Curtis one, and parts of parts of the Bela Lugosi version. Because the only problem I have with the Bela Lugosi version is it has a great first 30 minutes, and then once they get to England, the movie loses steam, and it never really regains the momentum from the beginning,
Yeah.
So that's the biggest problem with it. I guess going into before we get into the movie, I guess that just leaves, who is your favorite actor, including Jack Palance, that you've seen play Dracula in all the different versions?
Well, I would have to go with Christopher Lee again on this one. Although I should say though, I did find like Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu. I mean, I thought he was like, obviously I don't remember everything from that movie because I saw it several years ago, but I do remember him being very effective in the role. Like he was like a legitimately creepy character without being too like mean-spirited, I guess I could say. I don't know. But like I think he was probably like the creepiest Dracula / Nosferatu. So I think in terms of like an actual Dracula, I think Christopher Lee kind of has the look and the feel, and I mean definitely the voice. I mean he used to sing death metal, for crying out loud.
Oh, rest in peace, man. Well, that's the thing. What's funny about you saying Klaus Kinski though as Nosferatu. Oh, and by the way, for anyone who's like throwing their keypad at the screen or throwing their iPod down, yes, the remake of Nosferatu does call the vampire Count Dracula, but because it's so different than the Dracula versions, we're going to actually just call him Nosferatu. That way there's not any confusion, because Nosferatu is such a wildly different take on Bram Stoker's Dracula. But what's funny about you saying Klaus Kinski is Nosferatu / Dracula is that in the Jess Franco version, he plays Renfield.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he actually ate real bugs on set, and he was smearing the walls with what looked like blood, but it might have been actually feces. So, so he plays a very unusual Renfield in the Jess Franco version. So when we watch that, you might get kind of a weird kick of glee when you see him.
Yeah, I guess two different Draculas playing. Well, I mean,
one playing Dracula and one playing. Yeah. So and I guess with me, my favorite Dracula actor it's Christopher Lee. I mean, he's the iconic one. But I guess most underrated, because this is kind of a category that I want to subdue, so I'm not, just copying you, is, yes, Christopher Lee's my favorite, but I think the two most underappreciated Dracula actors would probably be Lewis Jordan from the BBC one, and Gary Oldman from the Francis Ford Coppola movie. Because a lot of people crap all over that movie, but they don't really talk about how good Gary Oldman is in the role. So, I think they see his, really terrible wig, and they're like, oh, Dracula. So, anyway. Well, I guess going on to the movie at hand, we watched the Dan Curtis version, which was originally called Bram Stoker's Dracula, but when Francis Ford Coppola was making his version, he bought the rights to the Dan Curtis one and pretty much hid the movie away. And now the only way to buy it is if you'll buy it on DVD. It calls the movie Dan Curtis's Dracula, even though the on-screen title is still Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Did he do that He did that just so there wouldn't be another Bram Stoker's Dracula out there?
Yeah, that's from my understanding. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen the making of and all the different various news stories for it. But, just to take out competition, pretty much. We wouldn't want to have two different versions, even though I don't think Jack Palance and Gary Oldman are anything alike. But I guess going into the plot stuff, it's pretty much the same story, you know. Jonathan Harker is a real estate agent who's trying to sell property to Count Dracula, who lives in Transylvania. And once he gets there, he finds out that Count Dracula is actually a vampire, and he's he's subdued, kept prisoner by Dracula and his vampire brides. Sometimes he only has one bride, like in the Hammer one. Sometimes he has a whole horde of them, like in the Francis Ford Coppola one. But he's detained, and Dracula goes to England looking for fresh blood. And of course, once he's there, he attacks some of the rich people, and this brings about the attention of the Dutch doctor, Dr. Van Helsing, who is one of the only people who stands in the way of Dracula. And then it's a battle of wits. And, the movie usually ends with Dracula being vanquished. What's interesting about this movie is this particular movie has a lot of significance because it's kind of the turning point for vampire fiction. Pretty much what happened was Dan Curtis, who directed and wrote and produced this movie, or he didn't write it, he produced and directed it. It was written by Richard Madison. What he did was, before he did Dracula, he was known for doing the very popular horror soap opera Dark Shadows. And there's a huge arc in Dark Shadows where, because of the audience having so much sympathy and appreciation for Barnabas Collins, the main vampire character in Dark Shadows, they developed a love interest, turned him into an anti-hero instead of the antagonist. And this proved to be very popular. So the whole love triangle of Dark Shadows changed, vampires from being the villains to being the anti-heroes and being misunderstood and loved and respected. And pretty much what he said was, in the interview on the DVD, that he ripped himself off and he just took the love story from Dark Shadows and put it into the Dracula story, which kind of clumsily put into the story, but I'll go into that in the good stuff. I mean, the bad stuff. But this is a very significant movie because it's the first one to put a love story into Dracula where there was no love story in the book or in any of the previous adaptations. So I guess I'm going to open up the floor to what we liked, what we disliked, and all that good stuff. So I guess let's get the negative stuff out of the way. What did you dislike about Dan Curtis's Dracula?
Yeah, so, I think, I suppose there wasn't really a whole lot to dislike. I do kind of think that, Jack Palance, to me, is kind of one of the weaker Draculas.
There is no way in this life to stop me.
I personally, when I look at him, he does, it's not, I'm not saying he, miscast or anything, or that he does a poor job, per se. It's just that, he doesn't really, he just doesn't really look or act too much like Dracula in this movie. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, he definitely has the presence that was brought by, Christopher Lee. He has a very strong physical presence, and I could believe him as being a very powerful adversary, but I don't know. There's just something really weird about Jack Palance. He's not really trying an accent, so he's just sounding like Jack Palance. And it's just really unusual. I didn't even notice it, but because of the love triangle, or not the love triangle, because of the love subplot, it just seemed really weird and awkward, because it didn't seem like Jack Palance was really good with the romantic roles. He's good at being a villain, but I haven't really seen enough of his movies to see if he's a good leading man who can, hold a romantic comedy or something. But I don't know, whenever it would, like, show him, like, the close-ups of him crying, looking back at the flashbacks as Vlad Tepes, I just kind of, I was kind of like, oh, man, this is bad. Just seeing Jack Palance crying with his, like, walrus teeth, because his fangs were always poking out, it was really awkward, you know. I think that's the easiest way to put it. When he's being evil, he's great. But when he's having to be romantic or sympathetic, it just doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I mean, I think maybe one of the problems is kind of just like, I guess when it comes to Jack Palance being Dracula, it's like he had one. So I think when it comes to Jack Palance's performance as Dracula, like, obviously this isn't, this is written in the script. But it's like he has a couple of kind of weird defining moments for him, like when he's in the hotel and he's just like beating back everyone he comes across. It's not even like a kung fu fight or anything. He just kind of like sweeps them aside, just like,
yeah, and he throws that one guy out the window.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, it's kind of like a weird move. It's kind of like weird to see Dracula doing that because, like, you know, Frankenstein's monster is supposed to be the one that gets the villagers all uppity. It's not, you know, Dracula's supposed to, like, kind of be more of a targeting one or two people and causing them pain, as opposed to, like, oh, there's this menace to society walking around. His name is Dracula, you know?
Yeah.
And then I guess some of the other defining moments that were kind of weird-ish, but, you know, I'm sure some people like him. But just like when he's going into when he wants to go into Lucy's room, and he's just like casually walking through their house, like there's not even any like subtlety. He's not trying to be seductive. He's not trying to be. He's not trying to like enter in secretly. He's just like, nope, I'm just walking through your house and I'm gonna open the locked door, and it's just like, okay, you know, it's just kind of a weird thing for Dracula to be doing. And then, of course, you have to think of the romance angle where it's like, you know, the make-out scene, which is kind of awkward.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm not a gay man, but I don't find Jack Palance very appealing to the eyes, so I can't imagine, you know, kissing him and having to have a romantic scene with him.
I think that's probably one of the I think that might be one of the things that kind of makes it not fit as well, because as I said earlier, like I kind of think that Dracula is supposed to be a kind of like semi unconventional type of handsome. Like I think kind of like what Christopher Lee had. Not necessarily like, I mean, you know, he's obviously not like one of the Twilight vampires that are supposed to sparkle and everything. He just have some kind of have a charisma and have a presence that is in some ways it's supposed to be like dark and evil, but it's supposed to be kind of like a strange warped form of handsome and sexy kind of. But Jack Palance didn't really have that, I feel like, and so to have him as the romantic Dracula who wants to make out with his victims before he bites them, kind of makes it like, well, you know, I don't think he has the looks for that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, I like his temper tantrums, because, you know, when he finds out that Lucy's been killed, he starts flipping everything around in the crypt, and he's just screaming, and it's very reminiscent of Tommy Wiseau's The Room, which I never thought I'd be comparing The Room to Dracula, other than the Dario Argento version, which, oh man, how embarrassing. But anyway,
you're tearing me apart, Lucy!
Lucy, you put a stake in my heart! No! You got garlic breath, Lucy. Everyone betrayed me.
Everyone betrayed me. I'm fed up with his walls.
But it just seemed really awkward because he has the power, and to be honest, I hate to say this because I do love the Hammer Draculas. The big problem with the Hammer Draculas is most of them were like scripts before they added Dracula, and then they just added Dracula and turned into a Dracula movie. So that's the problem, is he's handled very weirdly in all the different Hammer Draculas other than Horror of Dracula. So this one at least was, because it did have a mostly British cast and it was filmed in England, it has a very British feel, and it feels better than Hammer in some parts, especially Jack Palance being physical, and he's a lot more intimidating. It just sucks that it's a TV movie and they had to hold back from the gore and hold back from the real violence. So really all we're left with is his temper tantrums. And I'm just glad that Jack Palance had more to do than Christopher Lee did in the Hammer Dracula sequels. But it's just kind of sad that, it all pretty much boils down to the love triangle being really awkward and just Jack Palance not really handling it. Because I feel if they were going to do the romantic subplot and make it work, they should have just got Jonathan Frid from Dark Shadows. Or they should have just got another actor. Because Jack Palance, it just seems really uncomfortable. Like, they should have just made a straight version of they should have just made a straight version of the Bram Stoker book, like verbatim, and it would have been fine. Like, put him in old age makeup and just let him be a vampire. But because they're doing the whole romantic subplot, it just seems really awkward and stilted,
Yeah. And of course, and you were talking about while we were watching, or after we finished watching the movie the first time, that, it's weird because Dracula likes Mina, but Mina dies first anyway, and then he goes after Lucy, so there's not really like a reason why he would need to, because that wasn't his original love or whatever. You should talk about that.
Yeah, well, the thing that's weird is, it's kind of like a Universal Frankenstein kind of deal where they just keep switching names of characters for no reason. In the book and in most of the versions, including this one, Lucy and there's Mina and Lucy. They're the two female characters. Lucy's usually the one who has to go through the agonizing pain of becoming a vampire, and then she's killed, and then it comes back to Mina, who is the one who survives at the end, which, spoiler to a book that's 100+ years old, but anyway, or no, 200 years old, oh good lord. Anyway, so what's weird though is if they were going to switch the girls around, because usually Mina's the one who's the love interest, if there is a love interest, and Lucy's the one who's antagonized. In this one, he's in love with Lucy, and you think because he's in love with Lucy they'd just switch the roles, but no, they still kill Lucy first in this movie. So when Jack Palance is going, or when he's Dracula, when he's going after Mina, it seems like he's just going after her to spite everyone in the movie, just to do it out of revenge. He doesn't seem like he's actually interested in her at all, and that just seemed really weird and petty for Dracula,
Well, it's weird to have a love subplot that then ends up getting dropped for kind of a more of a revenge subplot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
but I suppose it's, maybe that's kind of just due to the limitations of the story, I guess. Because if he's going after two women, you have to have him love either one or both of them. So
Yeah.
I guess it's just like artistic choice. But I do agree that it's kind of weird how it comes out like that.
Yeah. Now, I guess, is there anything else that you found negative about the movie, or do you want to move to positives?
Yeah, there really wasn't too bad. I did think Dracula's death was kind of underwhelming.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, he did get stabbed and everything. It's like his reaction to being hit with the light is just so underwhelming. It's just like, oh, I've been hit with a light.
Ow, this is causing me mild discomfort.
Oh, I'm so upset by this. He just looks so. He looks like. Yeah, it'd be annoying if I was shined in the face with a bright light right now, but I'm not gonna die from it. That's kind of how it is like. And
Well,
it's that way it's kind of underwhelming. I guess that's just part of the they don't have any didn't have a budget to do anything cool. With
yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, I think they did have a budget. It's just since it's a TV movie, they were kind of limited with special effects, and then they couldn't get too graphic, because that's one thing I noticed was whenever they would do the death scenes, they would show everything off camera. So a lot of things with the movie is it's since it was a TV movie, it just had to be cut down for limitations, which is ironic because the movie was actually released theatrically in Europe. So when you watch the DVD, there's actually a trailer for the movie, which I can play somewhere on here. But there's in the trailer, it makes a big deal about Dracula. So it's just funny to think, man, this must have been really weird to see in theaters because it is a very obvious TV movie.
Right, yeah.
So I guess moving on to the positives, I mean, yeah, Jack Palance is kind of iffy, but I do think he still does deliver a decent performance. The one I really like, though, was Neil Davenport as Van Helsing. I think he had a really good presence. Yeah. Now, he's not as good as Peter Cushing, because Peter Cushing's just a very unique actor, but he just looks at you and he's great. Neil Davenport, though, he had a very good old British, gentleman charm, and he did seem very imposing.
Yeah. Well, I do think in terms of sheer look, from all the Dr. Van Helsings I have seen, I kind of think he kind of looks like the most authentic and the most straight from the looks more like he's actually from the late 1800s. Not that, of course, Peter Cushing I still think is superior in terms of, acting and what he gets to do and things like that. But I do think that he kind of almost looks, I don't know, he looks like he came straight from that era and he's not even really acting. He's just like, oh, there's Dr. Van Helsing. Yeah. I thought he did a good job.
Oh yeah, I really think he did a good job as well. And then for the other cast members, I liked Simon Ward as Arthur. He's a very odd British actor. Of course, I best remember him from the Hammer movie, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which is one we'll definitely have to cover on this show. So he's good in that. And I also liked Murphy Brown as Jonathan Harker. One thing I regret about this movie is they omitted a bunch of characters, and the one that's the most glaring that's not present in this movie, and this goes back to the bad, is there's no Renfield at all in this version of the movie.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm sitting here imagining to myself, man, who would have been a really good Renfield that they could have cast in this movie, and since I'm new to the world of Dan Curtis, I've only recently started watching Dark Shadows and going through his backlog of titles. I don't really know if there's anyone in his repertoire that would be suitable for Van Helsing. For Renfield. But since I have been watching Dark Shadows, I would recommend the guy who plays Willie in Dark Shadows, or even Jonathan Frick, who played Barnabas Collins. That would have been a really interesting outside the box kind of approach to it,
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking as you were saying that. Maybe he would be interesting.
Yeah, because he was complaining about how he didn't want to be associated with Barnabas, and then it's like, wait a minute, well, be Renfield anyway. Be the scary dude. Rats, thousands. Anyway, so going on with the good. The movie looks gorgeous. It has really good cinematography. The sets, the castles, everything looked great. I did enjoy the music, which is very Dark Shadows-esque. Except for the music box, which as soon as I heard the music box, I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a really hammy, really ill-conceived love story. This isn't going to be a good love story.
Well, at least for that, like, they didn't really explain the significance of the music box, but I think, not that I really wanted an explanation, because, I mean, I got what they were going for. It's like, oh, well, it's sentimental to him because it represents his past or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, I did feel like, even though I knew what it was for, like, I guess it just felt kind of hokey, you know, because it didn't. I guess I mean, I don't know if having an explanation would have made it, But I think if you're gonna have something like, if you're gonna have either like a music thing or something that like means something to the character like that, you ought to make it so that either that piece of music or that object or whatever means something to the audience as well. Because if it doesn't mean something to the audience, but it only means something to the character, then it can easily go into like, you know, the audience just won't care, or it can go into hokey territory like it did with this. It's just like, oh, okay, you know.
I fully agree with that. I think one thing that was handled better in this movie, because this movie also was one of the first ones to introduce the idea of comparing him to the real Dracula, Vlad Tepes. And even though he didn't get a lot of it, I feel like this movie handled that better than the love story, especially some of the flashbacks where it shows him being dragged off. You know, that's the one thing I can say positively about Jack Palance, is he had that physical presence, so I could see him as like a Genghis Khan warrior general who would be on the battlefield with his men just murdering everybody in sight. Like, he has the presence for that. So I think he did really well with the whole Vlad Tepes stuff, and I really do like the painting that's in the movie of him as Vlad Tepes on the horse with Jack Palance's face. If there was a print of that, I would totally buy that and put that in my house somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, the pacing in the movie's pretty well. I like the beginning. You know, the action towards the end was really well handled. You know, positively, I mean, it's just, for a TV movie of this caliber, I mean, it looked gorgeous. It delivered some things that we didn't see from Hammer movies. And, you know, for the most part, I did enjoy Jack Palance. I guess I'll just need another viewing to really sink in my opinion on how I feel it ranks with the other Dracula movies.
I guess just my kind of opinion at this point, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, even though I have these minor complaints, you know, I do think, for one, I don't necessarily think that all these things are, like, super bad. I do think that, I mean, I don't think they're super bad. I do like there are additions, because obviously I wouldn't want this version to be exactly like another version I've seen. Even though I do find some of the choices more questionable than others, I do find that overall the movie was a good adaptation. Although I do think it kind of be more of like a middle of the road Dracula. Like, it didn't innovate too much, and it didn't like, I don't feel like it really made its own identity that like sets it significantly apart from a lot of the other Dracula movies. And so I guess it's kind of in a weird, kind of precarious spot of not being like super amazing, but still having some small, unique twist, you know?
Oh yeah, I agree with that. That's a good way to put it. Wow, I mean, we haven't really argued much about this movie, so it might be a little bland on my side, but I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, this is a version that I've heard about, or I had read things about, since I was in middle school. They had the middle school I went to for 7th grade had a really outdated library with you know, those Crestwood books that a lot of horror video people do videos on. Like James Rolfe did one where it talked about all the different books with the pictures there in black and white, like for the Wolfman and Godzilla and King Kong.
No, I'm not familiar.
Oh, well, he did a whole video on him, and I think that'd be one for everyone to check out. I'm very familiar with those books, too, but they had one, specifically, not the Crestwood, but they had another book in the library that was just on Dracula movies, and the cover picture was Jack Palance from this one. So, I've been very familiar with the Dan Curtis Dracula, but it was just cool to finally see it. And I do like it. I think probably rewatching it, I'll be a lot more enthusiastic about it. But, you know, because one of the greatest discoveries I had last year was watching the BBC version and loving it, even though there were some jarring things in that one because they filmed all the interiors on videotape and then they filmed all the exteriors on film. So if they had one scene that went back and forth, the change in quality was pretty jarring. But you know, with the Dan Curtis one, it's all shot in film. It was very lit well. You know, and I think there wasn't really a bad performance in the movie. There really wasn't anything negative. It was just more of circumstance that made it bad. You know, I like a lot of things they did for it. I think all in all, it's a middle of the road Dracula movie. It's definitely better than most of the Bela Lugosi version, and way better than the Argento version. Dario Argento might be my favorite director, but dear Lord, when he makes a stinker, I'm not going to pretend he didn't make a stinker. You know?
Yeah, I think we need to. I hate to say it, but I do think, I think in terms of Draculas I want to watch, and of course I know we're. I don't know if I'm allowed to spoil this, but I know we're going to be watching the original and the Spanish version here soon, and I'm excited for that. I was just going to say that I definitely think that in terms of Draculas I want to watch at some point, I definitely want to rewatch the Klaus Kinski version, and I also want to rewatch Dario Argento's Dracula just because of how ridiculous it is. Because I've kind of already forgotten some of the ridiculous things in it, but
yeah,
I mean, it's terrible, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, which is sad because he did, I guess, the worst versions of multiple different stories, because his family opera is supposed to be the worst family opera movie. So, oh Lord. Well, I guess with closing thoughts, I definitely recommend this, not for first-time viewers of the Dracula story. I'd say if you've never seen a version of Dracula, I would say definitely watch the Hammer Dracula, and then
definitely don't watch this. This shouldn't be your first version.
No, I'd say this is a very good companion piece to a lot of different ones, but it's so middle of the road. It's not really horrible and it's not really great. It's just kind of very, very well made, average. So I think that's the biggest compliment I can give the movie, you know. So I guess that's kind of our closing thoughts on the Dracula movie. So I guess we better throw around some coffins and scream about how we've been betrayed by the world.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, I guess we'll go ahead and say, hopefully this episode turned out very well. This is the first time I've had a co-host over the phone instead of in person, so hopefully it sounds really good and everyone will enjoy it. So yay! Well,
okay. Well, I mean, I think it was a nice change of pace because instead of being at your house, I can just lay in bed and speaking to the phone. So.
Oh, so you're all nice and laid back. We might have to do this more often then, if it turns out good. So I guess, closing thoughts, you can find me at, at Jalaman22 on YouTube. You can leave comments on the episodes when they're posted. We have a Facebook page at apologizethepodcast.com or facebook.com. And you can find AJ at Dota Normie, the YouTube channel.
Apologize to the podcast.
Hello, and welcome to a commercial for Hello, This is the Doom Show. I'm Richard.
I'm Brad.
And on the podcast that is known as Hello, This is the Doom Show, we talk about giallo movies, slasher movies, horror movies,
We're going to interview Cary Grant live in the studio.
We're going to interview Lucio Fulci in the studio, folks. We're going to put Cary Grant in the studio with Lucio Fulci. It's the interview you never thought would happen.
I'm going to wear my Vincent Price slacks.
I'm going to wear my Citizen Kane wristwatch and monocle. And now Brad is going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in Portuguese. Brad, go.
I don't know Portuguese.
Go! Go!
Stop hitting me!
You're a natural actor.
Yeah.
You can listen to us at Hello Doomed Show